Hey,
Hello.
everybody. Welcome to the Android Police Podcast. I'm David Ruddick.
I'm Cody Toombs.
And I'm Jules Wong.
Who are you? I don't recall you being here. Get out of my house.
All right. See y'all. I'm going to go back to Pocket Now.
Now?
Now.
Now.
Yeah.
Pocket Now. That
Pocket
actually sounds
Meow.
dirty in a weird way. I'm not sure that's...
Wow,
I don't think
really?
that's okay.
I'm going to do the Pocket Now.
Oh, no. That's bad. Never say it again. We can never say Pocket Now again.
Oh dear.
Yeah.
Let's move on before we start melting down here, because I don't think I was I was expecting that for a start.
Nobody ever expects how we start.
And honestly, I'm not really sure what we're going to talk about this week. I don't think anything's happened in Android generally in this the late May of 2019 area. I don't think anything's going on. Probably we should just end the show immediately.
No way, man. No way.
Oh,
but you know what? You're right. Weird, Android, not so much is happening.
Yeah.
Let's talk about politics. That'd be awesome.
We can talk.
Exactly
actually, we are
what
going to talk about politics, and I think everyone's going to be very excited about that. And all of our listeners are going, what? And then we're going to go, way. And so, yeah, that was. I feel gross after doing that. I need to go take a shower. Actually,
I'm just so bubbly right now. I'm sorry. This is going to be every single horrible thing, every horrible pun that we can fit into this.
It really is. And honestly, Huawei's done everything to earn it. So this week, obviously, the big story everywhere has been, oh no, Huawei has now been placed on basically the bad actor list by the United States, courtesy of some man and his fake hair. And so Huawei is actually, they say they're okay, but they're not. They're very in a very bad situation. So to summarize, Huawei is no longer allowed to do business with any American company, which means they're no longer allowed to license a Play Store on upcoming products. And it's actually having repercussions beyond American companies, because ARM and a number of British telcos are saying they will now no longer work with Huawei, because I think they're fearful that they could be slapped with restrictions or trade issues if they continue working with Huawei. So ARM is probably the biggest one in terms of non-US implications, because ARM is saying well, yep, can't keep licensing Huawei chip designs because HiSilicon uses ARM designs, obviously, for their CPU cores and GPUs as well. So HiSilicon can keep making their existing designs, but going forward, that's a bit of an issue thingamajig, and I don't know how Huawei gets out of that. And then obviously they can't use Google services anymore for new phones going forward, outside of the 90-day little exception window they've had carved by the U.S. government. So that's also a big, it's a problemo for Huawei. I don't understand how they're going to be able to get out of this. Obviously, they're talking about alternative OSs, new app stores, blah, blah, blah. But this pretty much feels like two daggers straight to the back.
Yeah, and it's weird too how we've been through the two tangents that have gone into this. Of course, we have the trade wars, in which sanctions upon sanctions have been lined up, affecting billions and billions of dollars of goods that are crossing the Pacific every day. And then there's also the whole security aspect as well, where Huawei has been kind of, founded by a People's Liberation Army member, and it's always the government state-owned. Its backing has a lot to do with it. And then there's the concern about China's overall growing cybersecurity clout and its kind of influence in its South Asia sphere. And we've seen a lot of nudge, a lot of European countries, Germany being one of them, UK being another, to reject Huawei in their equipment tenders for 5G networks. And this move, I feel like, is kind of like the nuclear button. Is like, boom, let's just end this all and show everyone that you really shouldn't be doing business with Huawei. And at least right now, I think we're in the holding pattern. Next 90 days is going to be interesting to see. We've already seen it with ZTE, another Chinese telecom telecommunications company that went through a similar deal back, what was it, like last year, a couple
In
of years
December.
ago? In December, because it was like this is like a protracted saga. It was talking about Iran sanctions, how they conducted business and broke those sanctions, and then blah blah blah. Years later, they got into an import ban, and that was fun. So, billions of dollars of fines later. It's just it's just not been smooth for ZTE, and Huawei might be
Yeah.
kind of swing
I
things here.
I think so with ZTE, there was an obvious, I think it was, God, what was it? What I forget what
The Iran
agency.
sanctions.
Yeah, it was the
Yep.
Iran sanctions was the base. I forget the name of the agency in America who was in charge of that. I guess it was maybe it was the FTC. Um, Basically said here, the issue was they had already been hit with the fines, basically saying, "Hey, you guys were working with Iran. If you screw up one more time, we are going to hit you with some serious trade embargoes, and we're going to screw your business." Um, and then it got found out that ZT had accidentally still been paying bonuses to people who were involved in the sales to Iran. It sounded really like ZT is just an incompetently run business, and that people in ZT wanted the bonuses for the business they had done with Iran. And ZT was like, "Yeah, okay, I guess we'll pay your bonuses." And then America's like, "Gotcha." And at that point, the United States is like, we're hitting you with, we're hitting with a bad actors list. You cannot work with any American companies anymore. It was really out in the open, honestly. Like the evidence was there. Some people said, ZT was definitely a chip, to be used in negotiations with China, which I don't disagree with. But the U.S. had a very solid, piece of evidence to say, well, we told you not to do this, and then you did it. So, here's where we ended up. With Huawei, the evidence is the United States has really, really come down on the side of they're obviously sponsoring state espionage. And we don't have anything we can show you that they do that, but that's definitely what they're doing 100%. And
Well,
so
isn't the DOJ also going after them for a similar sanction breaking in Iran, as well as like they went after the
it is.
CFO Meng
That's that's
Wanzhou?
that's
Yeah,
in the past. Yeah, they're going after CFO, and obviously CFO is under arrest in Canada for that.
And I believe that is the basis that they put them under this list, officially stating at least.
it's one of many things that right now the situation with Huawei seems to be kind of the classic, like, let's throw everything against the wall and just see
Yeah.
what sticks, whatever people kind of buy into. And right now, I think the Iran embargo has not really held up. People don't seem to care about that. Understandably, it doesn't really affect us. Whereas the threat of security, that's a big deal, especially to anyone who is, to put it bluntly, easily spooked.
Absolutely. And I think with Huawei, it's definitely become a Trump thing where we're really just talking about Huawei has become basically a stand-in for the China itself. And basically, we're now using this as a geopolitical like bargaining chip, and saying, well, you have your huge, telco that is massively popular around the world and does tons of business, and obviously is responsible for a significant little bit of China's overall GDP. Like Huawei is hugely profitable; it's a massive company. Like honestly, Huawei is so embedded in the telecommunications business. Like one of the things tell people is like, going to MWC every year. If you go to the Huawei like partner booth, it is like a little city. there is no bigger area in MWC than Huawei's partner area. Like there's a restaurant with like full, like full food service
Mm,
and everything. Like one year they had like a little koi pond inside. It was just,
oh
it's
boy.
totally nuts. And so they really go all out. And it's because, for Huawei, Europe has been this golden goose for getting network equipment deals for the last like, 5, 6 years. And so Huawei's business is really, really, really counted on expansion in the West for their network equipment company. And so it's hard to grasp just how big they are in terms of like the overall scheme for China. ZT is also very big in the network equipment business, but they're relatively dwarfed by Huawei. And so for the US to hit Huawei with these crippling sanctions is just it's very open trade war. It's just saying, well, you can't you're one of your crown jewels of your whole country is unable to compete anymore. You just can't compete in the global marketplace. And that is aggressive isn't even the right word. That is extremely, like I said, it's open trade warfare. And so it really is a big deal. It goes beyond just like Android. Android's a small part of it, like the handset business. This is really very geopolitical and something that is America is putting real pressure on China to act now.
So some of the numbers here that we're dealing with, Huawei spends 11 billion, at least it did last year, $11 billion on all the components and services that that are U.S. based, and this is what the ban's affecting here. And then there's also the fact that I think about half of their business, like it's something like $180 billion US in revenue, was made last year. Half of that is in China, half of that's elsewhere, half of that is in consumers, and the other half is in carriers and enterprise combined. So I think it used to be the case where the smartphones were less important, but they've been growing quarter after quarter with these big double-digit percentage gains every quarter, and I don't think they've diversified enough to the fact that this is going to take a very heavy hit on their bottom line day after day as this ban goes on. Even with the reprieve going on, there's still that uncertainty there that these vendors, they're going to be still inching away, keeping an eye on this, and just wondering what happens next. And all the meanwhile, Huawei says that, well, they're doing okay.
Well, without a doubt. And I think the other thing that we haven't really seen kind of like fall out just yet is the situation with licensing around 5G, which Huawei is almost certainly a licensee of Qualcomm for certain 5G patents. Qualcomm is the largest holder of 5G intellectual property in the world. And so to access, carriers around the globe, Huawei is probably has to work with Qualcomm on some level. And Huawei has also been a notorious holdout on licensing from Qualcomm. So they're still in a fight, like over Qualcomm stock actually took a huge hit on the Huawei news
Yeah.
because they can no longer negotiate a licensing deal with Huawei. They were actually in the process of negotiating this deal, and Huawei had said on a recent Qualcomm said on a recent earnings call, like, "Yeah, we got our Apple deal. We're in process with Huawei, and we're confident we're going to work this out." And then the trade ban got announced, and Qualcomm stock took a like 10% dump, like a really big hit. Granted, it's way, way, way up after the Apple thing was resolved. So it's not that big in the grand scheme of things, but I think that probably what we're seeing in terms of like EE and Vodafone UK saying, we're not going to carry Huawei's 5G phones anymore. We're going to wait until this resolves and see what happens. And those are companies that are not in any way obligated, by this trade ban. They're companies that are obviously they're foreign. And so what we're seeing there, I think, is caution because they're concerned that if they sell these phones, that somebody in the U.S., a U.S. state actor is going to say, those Huawei phones you're selling, those have American technology inside them, and you'll find that those phones are banned under our trade rules. And so, if you want something, if you don't want something to happen in terms of our trade relationship, So I think we'll see what happens. I think in mainland Europe, I don't think we've heard anything saying Huawei's 5G phones have been banned yet. But the UK has been the I think the canary in the coal mine there.
Yeah.
And that also, around the UK leads to ARM, which preemptively decided, nope, we're not working with Huawei anymore, um, which was really interesting. I don't think Huawei was ready for that because Huawei had to come back, after that news came out that ARM is not going to work with them, and issue a rebuttal saying, no, 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 we can definitely still, make things without ARM. And I don't think anybody really believes them about that. Um, it's a crippling blow.
Yeah, and I do want to take up a point from one of our Twitch chatters here, actually 1990, talking about Canada. Like that's more local to us, even though Huawei has no presence at all, pretty much in the U.S. The Washington has been really on the backs of carriers in terms of getting rid of Huawei ever since even like 2012, 2011. DOJ has been investigating them since then on those sanctions. But in any case, in Canada, it's been kind of weird because we have Bell, TELUS. Huawei does have a strong presence. It has research presence there, millions of dollars, hundreds of millions of dollars there, and they're a really big presence. And Bell and TELUS have been saying that this is going to really hurt if Huawei is not an option for them, if they cannot be using Huawei for their 5G networks. Prices will go up, and that's kind of what they've been saying. Huawei is a really aggressive price driver in terms of 5G technologies. So everyone, in addition to saying that we won't be able to find 5G on our city blocks because millimeter wave is so weirdly deployed, is also going to be saying, well, it's not just going to be Verizon's going to say it's not just going to be $10 a month that we're going to tack on for your 5G service. It's going to be $20, $25, even more. And in an age where we're kind of very dependent and really want to be dependent on more on wider bandwidth, bigger speeds here. Yeah, that's it's going to hurt if
Well,
that's the
I
case.
think one of the interesting things about this is actually that the U.S. is not dependent on Huawei for infrastructure, which is puts it in a unique position. The United States has always gone for Nokia and the other big one.
Ericsson.
Ericsson. Um, Nokia and Ericsson have always been the big wireless infrastructure providers in the United States because, Congress sent a letter to all U.S. carriers back, like, I don't know, 5 years ago, I think, something like that,
Mm.
saying, hey, if you work with Huawei, like, you're probably going to be subject to a congressional investigation. And all the carriers were like, okay. And they just stopped. They never worked with Huawei. So there's not, as far as I'm aware, a single piece of Huawei telco equipment in the United States of America, which puts us in a position where, banning Huawei actually doesn't probably hurt the 5G rollout for us, but it hurts it for almost everybody else globally, um, which is another interesting part of the bargaining chip argument, where the United States is hamstrung in weird ways around 5G. For example, in the United States, really the big problem with 5G here is the lack of spectrum availability. There is 5G globally is relying heavily on freeing up new low and mid band spectrum, especially in China. In China, they're freeing up a huge 100 megahertz block of low band spectrum, I think around 500 megahertz, to deploy 5G standalone networks nationwide in China. And that is a huge, huge deal. And that's why China wants to be first on 5G. And it's probably why they effectively will be in a lot of areas. Um, Whereas in the United States, carriers have been like slap fighting over anything from 600 to 1,000 megahertz for years, and so it's very broken up in the United States. Like who has 25 megahertz here, who has 50 megahertz here, and T-Mobile, Verizon, and AT&T have really like segmented that out. And the problem is a lot of the 5G new radios benefits are realized when you have a big chunk of like 100 megahertz of spectrum, broadband, as we would say, true broadband spectrum. And that's when you get, the ultra high download speeds, and you can really deploy that network equipment and offer like the super low latency that everybody wants. The only carrier in the US that's able to do that, ironically, is Sprint, because they have
Oh
they have a
dear.
full 100 megahertz at 3.5 gigahertz nationwide, basically. But Sprint is the one saying, "Oh, we don't have enough money to like roll this out everywhere. It's going to be a big problem." But every other carrier, nobody realizes exactly, like AT&T and Verizon, they are absolute. Their hands are tied on low and mid band for 5G, which is really interesting. They don't have anything. The AT&T and Verizon do not own a 100 megahertz chunk of anything. So it really makes rolling out 5G a very difficult and expensive process for them, because they're going to have to do refarm, where they take existing LTE and 3G banding and basically take that spectrum and make it 5G, which means pushing customers off of it, because
Five
there's
Jesus Christ.
yes. And so it's an interesting situation, and part of that comes down to U.S. policy around spectrum, which is unique, let's say, globally. Um, there are a lot of pieces of spectrum that are still dedicated to like digital TV broadcasts that don't exist globally, and there's a whole lot dedicated to the U.S. military, that other countries around the world are not using for those purposes. And carriers are screaming at the U.S. government, like, just reduce the amount of spectrum you rely on to do these things. And I think we're going to definitely come to a head on that. Now that it sounds likely that T-Mobile and Sprint are not going to be allowed to merge, they're going to both be like crying at the FCC that we cannot grow without more spectrum. And I think that's going to be probably the big telco conversation in the US. And as that relates to Huawei, basically the whole thing is like the US is artificially restricting its ability to roll out 5G in a meaningful way because of the spectrum crunch that we have. Meanwhile, globally, a lot of other countries are willing to say, "Yep, totally, all this is available. Use it, 100%, ready to go." That's why you already have 5G in the UK, Switzerland, Spain, and there are a number of other European countries. I know Switzerland already has like significant 5G coverage for the country. Like they're just like, yep, it's already there. Now Switzerland's obviously very rich, but a part of that definitely is the spectrum availability, which we don't have in the United States.
Yeah. China definitely has definitely the capacity to do so. I think Beijing's metro network, one of its lines, its entire line has been just covered up with millimeter wave, which ideal place to do that, ideal place to deploy that, and they're clocking in at 1.25 gigahertz. So we're in catch-up mode.
It'd be incredible if they can cover a whole city in millimeter wave. It's proving to be very difficult, based on what we've seen with Verizon so far in the US, which is basically like, well, it's expensive and it does not work especially well.
Yeah, I don't think our cells can cover from lamppost to lamppost here.
Yeah, it's incredible. Like, I mean, it's an interesting conversation to have. I would love to, at some point get there's a guy who really understands this stuff, Sasha Segan. Get
Yeah.
him on the show and talk about 5G deployment in the United States, because we are in a unique and interesting situation in America in terms of how 5G is rolling out. And millimeter wave is really, to me, it is a kind of, I don't want to call it a conspiracy. I would call it kind of a false flag operation, where carriers are being like, "Oh yeah, definitely, we can definitely run this whole millimeter wave thing. Look at all these gigabits we're getting. Look at all the gigabits over here, over there." And I think what's going to happen is they're going to be like, "Oh, but it's really expensive, and it's spectrum to roll out these speeds in many places." Hint, hint, nudge, nudge, FCC. I really do think at this point for Verizon and AT&T, they view millimeter wave as like a marketing platform to the FCC to say
Oh
we
yeah.
need more spectrum, because it is so expensive and it's so hard to roll out. out in like densely, the obvious place you want to do is urban centers, because like you get
Yeah.
max amount of pops, which is say the max amount of people covered by a single node. But the problem is, urban centers are proving to be like physically challenging for 5G because you have to find somewhere to put the node, which is usually street lamps or traffic lights, which works in some cities very well, but in others, like San Francisco, it wouldn't work because there are no street lamps. Like they,
Yeah.
that wouldn't work.
And
So
terrain is definitely another issue in terms of propagation and all that. And also, I think, there's even so much that you can do with millimeter wave before you crash into something. I mean, we Cody and I were just talking about this before the show in terms of NASA. They're saying that I believe it's the 24 gigahertz line, the 24 gigahertz band that they're kind of struggling with, because they use that to transmit data about forecasts, about
yes,
global forecast, satellite imaging, and all that stuff. And even at that point, 5G is just kind of creeping into their territory, and that's going to affect their capabilities in terms of
yeah.
forecasting hurricanes. And it's not good. Response times will be killed off, they say.
Yeah,
So it's
we should probably have like a 5G episode at some point, but I guess we are
oh yeah,
running
definitely.
behind on topics. So by the way, if you're watching the show right now, go to Twitch. We actually live broadcast on Twitch every Thursday at 5:30 p.m. PST. And if you're an Amazon Prime subscriber, you can actually subscribe to our show on Amazon for free. And what subscribing does, obviously, gives you a notification if we're live. It also gives you subscriber status in our live chat, and it helps support the show. So, if, for example, if you're an Amazon Prime subscriber and if you subscribe to our show on Twitch, you financially help support us. It doesn't cost you anything. Like money just comes to us and nothing transactionally happens to you. So you get one free Twitch subscription as part of your Amazon Prime membership. You just have to link your Twitch and Amazon accounts. It's super easy. We're at twitch.tv/Android Police. And if you sign up for the show and support us, a big fat notch will come down on the live stream, Pixel 3 XL notch, and that's fun. And we'll thank you for subscribing to the show, of course, which we definitely appreciate. And also, you get a chance to notch us once a month, because every month your Twitch subscriptions require renewal if you're going to keep using them. And if you want to keep subscribing to our channel, which continually supports us every time you do it, so it's not just a one-time thing. Every time you resubscribe, we get additional support financially for that, and we really appreciate it. So again, twitch.tv/Android Police. If you are an Amazon Prime member, you get one free Twitch subscription per month, and we would really love if you use that subscription on Android Police.
Don't you also get Ryan Hager emotes, his glowing face in the chat? I think that's also a nice addition. We really like to value pack this
It's
subscription in.
it's an addition. I don't know if I'd call it a nice addition, but it's definitely an addition. You get those things, whether you like it or
Uh,
not.
You will find something to do with it. That's what's
Yes.
important.
Speaking of things that we're going to tell you about, whether you like it or not, the Honor 20 Pro is a new phone, and it's probably not coming to America because Huawei very scared, bad times. Um, but it actually looks pretty good. I did get a chance to use it relatively briefly, and I would call it like the P30 Pro Lite, but also in a sense of like it costs like $500 less. Like it's way cheaper than a P30 Pro.
Honor
It's a good
doesn't
phone.
really cut corners in terms of what they take from the Huawei. I mean, arguably, maybe just the camera, but even like it's what it was. It's just the Leica name, and I'm
I
not sure
okay,
if
Well,
so
it's
wasn't the screen a little bit
yes.
yeah.
So the corner cuts come camera, screen, chipset. Those are the big ones. So camera, you don't get the periscope camera. You get a effective 3x optical zoom, which is a traditional lens system, not one of those crazy periscope stack systems. Um, and then you get an LCD display. And to be honest, Honor's LCDs, like that is the most obvious cost cut on the phone. Like they don't look fantastic. They're
Uh,
fine. They're very bright. Um, the colors are pretty accurate, but like the viewing angles and stuff, like it's obvious. Like this is where you're saving money. And the other thing is a chipset. So this has a Kirin 960, something like
is it
that.
960? I thought they
Is
would
it a
be.
965? It's something. It's like a
The
weird.
980. Or wait, no, that's Huawei's
Oh, it
phone.
has a 980. Yes.
Oh
Yeah,
yeah, this is
because like
Okay.
980.
because I know like they wouldn't do that on the chipset because they all just carry it over from the mainline
It is a
product, and I
980. Okay, for some reason I thought it was like a slightly budgety version. Okay, no, it has a
yeah,
980 and
I was
8 gig
surprised that chipset. I mean, screen, totally, yeah, but mm,
Yeah. So the other things like so Scott talked about in our review like the external speaker is crap. The haptics are crap. And those are and I think the screen personally is not that great. Scott did not point it out specifically, but I think his LCDs go like it's fine, but it's no OLED and I think it's where we're saving money. Um Honor has, as far as I understand, been like really, really successful in Europe because of the price specification situation. Um, and also the fact that they're more willing to work with operators than OnePlus has been historically because Huawei has more existing relationships. So it's made their products actually pretty like interesting. And the 20 Pro is cheaper than I think the OnePlus 7 Pro will be in continental Europe. So it does make it like an interesting idea. I would say having used the P30 Pro, which is basically the premium version of this phone. Uh, there are little things about EMUI that still do bug me. Number one is that YouTube just runs like hot garbage on Kirin chipsets because there's no chipset optimization going on. I don't think so. Like YouTube picture in picture is not supported at all. Like it just doesn't work.
ugh.
That's one,
Well,
and then
it's for the it's the Tencent games. It's all those games that you'll be playing. Pub, no, it's not PUBG anymore. What is it? It's like the stupid
I
Patriotified
think you'll find it's Fug K
uh,
or something like
Fun
that.
K or something like that. But it's literally like you can't kill anyone, or you. It's like they just it's like basically the weirdest Chinese propaganda thing going on.
Good socialist killing time. And
Yeah.
and the other like so the YouTube thing actually somebody emailed me as soon as I got the P30 Pro like, "Hey, have you noticed that like YouTube like performance is just like super garbage on it?" And I'm like, "Well, I haven't noticed that yet." And I kept using YouTube on the phone. I'm like, "Oh,
Mm.
yeah, it's pretty bad." Um, and I think that's because I'm guessing it's because it does not have a hardware VP9 decoder on it, which is what Qualcomm's chips now do have, which allows for the 60 FPS HDR gobbledygook for YouTube. So that's one thing that I've noticed about Huawei's phones. The other thing about EMUI is notifications are collapsed by default, and I think that should be against the law. But not okay in my book. So like you get Gmail notification and it's just collapsed. So you just get like a tiny snippet of the subject line and no quick actions. You have to pull down the notification to get them. And not okay. I don't like that. And also the other thing is like the background task killing is hyper aggressive. Like to the point where like if I am listening to a podcast and I pause it and 10 minutes later open up my phone, the background task is gone. Like it just doesn't remember that the playback is going on. So I am not super happy with certain things about the software. That said, Scott's experience overall with the Honor 20 Pro echoes mine with P30 Pro, where you're just like, wow, the battery life is incredible. The cameras are really good. And the value equation, you're just like, well, yep, great phone. Can't deny that's fantastic phone. It does have these slight issues in the Honor 20 Pro more so, I think, than the P30 Pro. The P30 Pro has great haptics. And it has a much better bottom firing speaker. Not great though, And I think the design is very nice and also has wireless charging on the P30 Pro. So there's not no reason for the glass back. With the Honor 20 Pro, it's a cost cut thing, but overall, like I have to hand it to Huawei in terms of what they're doing with handsets. Like they're very good. Like overall, just in terms of feature set and capability, even if there are still little things about the software that kind of are annoying.
Hmm, interesting. Well, we'll have to see how this whole situation with Huawei goes along and see whether or not that leads to a collapse,
Yeah, so
just like the
prediction, I think
notification.
if nothing changes, it's going to go up badly. I think just
Yeah.
not good, not great. Speaking of things that are probably going to go not fantastic, oh well, that's the next story. Speaking of things that are going actually kind of oddly good, the OnePlus 3 and 3T are getting Android 9, which is good. Granted, Android Pie has been out for about 9 months now, but they are getting it, and so Artem
Yeah,
really wanted us to write a story about how the OnePlus 3 and 3T are the first Android phones to get 3 named releases of Android that we know of. So the issue with this has been, well, historically, Android used to have more like biannual, or like 2 every year releases in terms of major point releases, and they wouldn't change the name of the dessert until they were ready. Like it was very arbitrary. So like for Jelly Bean, we had 3 versions of Jelly Bean.
yeah.
That I think that was the longest lived specific version of Android. We have 4.1, 4.2, and 4.3. They were all Jelly Bean.
Actually, I think gingerbread technically was the longest.
Oh yeah, you're
Assuming you don't count in honeycomb with
yes,
its
because
weird release timing.
gingerbread,
But
because they had split
Yeah.
between phones and tablets and everything. You're right. That was definitely a gingerbread was longer lived. So
There were like
gingerbread had like
7 iterations, weren't there?
2.3.0 to 2.3.6, I think.
they made
Something.
it to 2.2.7, or sorry, 2.3.7.
Yeah.
Wow.
So 8
Okay, yeah.
Um,
iterations. Wow.
So gingerbread lived a long time.
but to be fair, like all of this is sort of like the dinosaur days of Android.
It
Like
is.
in
Absolutely.
modern times, we're living in very different days now.
No, definitely. So, Artem wanted us to write about this from the perspective of it's the longest supported Android phone of all time. And we were like, well, if you go back in time and you look at some of the older phones, like the Galaxy Nexus, which launched with Ice Cream Sandwich and got all the way to Kit Kat, like that phone was technically it got more updates than this phone did, and those were all major updates. Like you look at every single one of those updates, maybe think of the cat, maybe only got to 4.3. Yeah, 4.0 to 1 2 3. Yes, it only got to Jelly Bean. Even so, all of those were major updates. They introduced new features, new APIs, and so maybe in terms of the number of years between the last update and the original one wasn't as long, but it did get a lot of updates. And also, we were kind of looking at like, well, yeah, OnePlus, it sounds like they've supported a really long time. Like it's been 3 years, but realistically, it's actually only been like 2.5 years of support because in terms of how Google rolls out updates, like this update should have been out like, over half a year ago. Um, and the other thing that kind of rung hollow to me was, well, in about a little over 2 months, Google's phone of the same chipset and general era is going to get a whole version higher of Android than the OnePlus 3. So the original Pixel is going to get Android Q. Um, it's just that, it already got Pi like last year. So the one or the original Pixel is already like 9 months ahead of the original OP3. It's just that it's not as old technically, even though it has a similar chipset. So there was a lot of, let's say, hemming and hawing over how
Yeah,
we
there are
covered this
a lot
issue.
of
Yeah.
qualifications going on. I mean, it's a third party OEM. They also have their own skin to worry about, and just for the fact that they're not proximate to the source. They don't have like the priorities. I should be careful with my words, but it's like, like they
Are you
can't
saying they're
do it like
settling, Jules? Are you saying they're settling?
one OnePlus is not Google, so that's that we're kind of setting different standards. I also appreciate the fact for the time that Google stopped indexing searches that the story appeared as 3T OnePlus dash 3 as our title for the story.
Yes,
So
thank you for clicking on that, everyone. We're sorry we confused you, but we we
again,
we
blame
love
Google.
your clicks nonetheless.
They
So
can
the thing
update.
is, though,
Yeah,
like with all of this being said, and you gotta qualify so much about it, but at the same time, this is still sort of showing up a lot of other OEMs. You won't find Samsung supporting any of their phones, not with major updates. Like they'll send out security updates and stuff like that for a really long time, but they're not shipping major updates. LG isn't anywhere close to this. Uh, throw out the entire list of everybody else except weirdly Essential. Maybe we'll have to wait and see how that plays out. But with the one phone that they did and don't sell anymore and aren't following up ever supposedly, we'll see how that plays. But OnePlus is at least holding a pretty good run here compared to what everyone else has done. So, they do deserve a little bit of a kind of a nod. They're doing good, even if it's a little late.
yeah, pat in the head or something like that.
I
That's
think
nice.
OnePlus has generally done a much better job on software support than pretty much anybody but Google and Essential. Like, an Essential is like two guys in a basement being whipped by Andy Rubin, and they just turn out software updates. That's their whole job, and I don't think they're paid. And I'm pretty sure they just get enough water to survive. And every month, software updates, software updates, software updates, and I would just love to see how that works there. And I think the only one that even gets close is probably Nokia. And Nokia is more like, well, yes, we push out the updates, but hope it doesn't break your phone. Which is,
Yeah,
they seem to have a bit of an issue in terms of quality, in terms of software QA at Nokia that I don't think OnePlus historically has had. I would say with OnePlus, they do have bugs with updates, but usually, and they're usually fairly trivial, and I honestly don't hear about them as much as I would say Samsung or Google even. OnePlus seems to use its like crowdsourcing of data pretty effectively. Granted, the updates like in terms of major OS updates come later than, Google does, so they get that benefit. But they've been pretty good about it.
yeah. And I think, Nokia, to add on to that, it's just they're driving the train on scale, and at some point, you just get less in terms of returns for software updates, and that's kind of unfortunate. But sometimes, like, we have to really take the optics of these things into consideration when determining the scale of success. Speaking of optics, I
Ooh,
know that was
Good
very
one.
tough.
nice,
I love
nice.
it. I
I
love it.
approve so much.
We are learning that, well, Google just said it. They're doing a version 2, not versus 2, version 2 of its Google Glass Enterprise Edition. So this is for them businesses out there that can't afford, was it $3,500 for a Microsoft HoloLens? And, I think with the continuation of just like a glasses optus spectacle type of thing, they're going for volume. They're going for easy to carry, easy to deploy, and that was made apparent with the add-on of the what is it, the Android Enterprise Mobile Management program, so you can manage apps and APIs on every
Yeah.
device that you own. So, and it's $1,000 base price. We presume that,
Which is, I think, largely immaterial.
yeah,
So according to Stephen Hall, this is one of Google's hardware products that just like prints money. Like, you wouldn't believe it, but you're like, really? Google Glass makes money? And well, Google Glass has found a niche in the enterprise and like corporate sector, where people who are basically like very hands focused, hands, um, they're using their hands a lot in whatever they're doing, and the heads up data that a system like Glass can provide is extremely valuable. It makes them more efficient. Basically, I'm not saying it turns them into robots, and I would never want to equate workers to robots because obviously nobody is a robot,
So
but it does.
you're the reason why all of our jobs are moving to Sri Lanka and
Write more
Vietnam, man.
deals, Jules. Just keep writing them. and so I think that realistically, like that is where Google has found the availability, like the customer base for this. And so probably they've had a lot of customers saying like, hey, we want to be able to do ABC, not just A. And the new version of Glass definitely seems to be about expanding capability because it has a much more powerful chipset than the original one, which was some crappy TI map piece of dual core garbage. The new one's a quad core Qualcomm XR1, which is a much, 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 much more powerful piece of hardware. So I think that Google is actively betting on Glass as something, a business that can grow, and one that is actually probably like future looking in terms of like profits. Where companies really want this kind of hardware, they need it for certain things, and that's expanding. So I've always said, I wouldn't say always maybe, but I've said for a long time that for AR, especially, the enterprise and like professional use cases are so far ahead of anything consumer. Like it's just like it's so much better suited for devices that need to be in specific applications like shipping centers, doctors and surgery. Um, those are like the two that I can remember off the top of my head. But either way, like for distribution and for advanced medical stuff, like AR has proven itself. Like it's a useful piece of technology.
Yeah.
So I think Google understands that, and I think that's why Glass is continuing to iterate. And I think the overall bet there is, well, eventually AR maybe becomes a consumer technology where you could see a future where people are using this for everyday things. But in the meantime, keep developing those enterprise applications and keep advancing in that area and just see what happens. I think it's a long, long, long time before AR hits like a consumer use case where you're going to see people actually buying it.
Well, in practical terms, you got to figure it's like a lot of different projects that we hear about Google and almost any company running, where in, in this case, yes, Glass is making money for them because they're contracting out with companies, doing a lot of custom work. Um, but even with various divisions where a product isn't necessarily a moneymaker, a company will stick with it sometimes because it's an excuse to continue doing R&D on that product or the technologies that go into it. Like in the case of Glass, they're if they were to leave this project sort of just sitting dead on the floor, and in let's say 5 years it starts becoming popular again, or some good reason for something like this starts existing, then they gave up 5 years worth of time. They could have been iterating on it, building out, learning new lessons about it.
Yeah.
And so there's so many good reasons to keep a project like this alive.
I agree. And honestly, like as somebody who looks at Glass and says like I will never wear that, I don't want it, just keep it away from me. I still understand the value. Especially from the business standpoint, which is where I think AR really has its future, is definitely in the productivity and accessory standpoint from professionals, specialists, and just actually really like line workers, where eventually you're going to get to the point where these people just need this kind of technology to do their jobs in the most efficient way possible. So I understand
$1,000
where
per
you're
unit
saying.
at this point might not still be the time for that, but hey, I mean, if we can commoditize that to heck, uh, Perhaps we'll have to
Yeah,
see about that.
I think so. Like, in terms of productivity, like how much commerce is your average like Amazon warehouse person doing a year? And I'm sure Amazon's crunching the numbers very actively. So I think there's a very big future for this kind of technology.
And I could easily see them scaling this really effectively for a lot of other purposes. Like, just to go to one of the kind of weird little sort of niche cases, but one that I experienced with the original Google Glass, it honestly was really nice for driving navigation. When you
Yeah.
don't have to refocus down to a screen in your car and then change your focus back to looking out at the road, like just having that thing that is intentionally, specifically, properly focused in front of your eye, it it really was actually a very nice driving experience.
No, I
And
definitely agree with that. Yeah,
yeah,
that's
I
true.
I could see if they could make it a little bit lower price, well, actually a lot lower price, sure, but get it lower price, make it very focused, and put it on professional drivers who have to go into areas that they aren't going to know. This would be fantastic.
That would be true actually for delivery drivers. I could definitely see a market where it's just providing contextual information where like, okay, you're going here, but also here's the apartment number. And does the does the like recipient want you to knock? Do they want you to just leave it at the door? Is there a signature required? Like just these little things that make the process more efficient.
Right?
Mm,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. So, in terms of things that actually make sense versus things that don't, let's talk about the Galaxy S10 5G briefly. Yeah, it just because this phone. So if you've been, honestly, we wrote a post about it when it came out and actually did tons of views. I was really surprised because I guess I shouldn't be because it was basically like, hey, what if you give your Galaxy S10 Plus a bigger battery and an even bigger screen? And so obviously people were like, yeah, I want it. So it's like the size of a Note 9 and had a bigger battery and it does 5G. I should say has. It is in the present tense because you can now buy one.
Well, see, I
Um,
think I would have thought that like people would be disappointed because of 5G. It's going to be this battery hug. It's going to be everything. It's going to take everything it needs to perform correctly. So it's like might not be the most ideal kind of thing going on for a first gen product.
Yeah, but it's never going to connect to 5G because 5G is barely available. So the battery life will be great.
Yeah.
The first, honestly, if I bought one of these, the first thing I would do if there's a setting to disable 5G, I would just go in there and turn it off. That would be like user advice number one would just be disable 5G. Um, but Ryan had a chance to use it with 5G in Minneapolis, and he did get some interesting anecdotes about that. So there are a lot of people who went to Chicago to test it last week, and they found speeds in excess of like 1 gigabit. So like 1.2, 1.3, 1.4 gigabits, which is crazy. Of course, that's all over millimeter wave. Ryan got basically, I think, the same speeds he did on the Moto 5G mod or whatever, which were like high 700, 800 megabits a second, which is nothing to like sneeze at. Like
Yeah.
it's really fast, but he didn't get any kind of crazy speeds that they were seeing in Chicago. And also, he found out from somebody who works at Samsung that if the phone is getting too much 5G and it gets too warm, it will turn off the 5G radio because it's getting too hot, which is interesting. And I've heard this is not the first time I've heard about this. I was actually talking to another manufacturer of phones, and they were saying like, yeah, 5G it generates a lot more heat than your typical smartphone radio. And so this is actually ZT was telling me this. And like, so for the Axon 10 Pro 5G, we designed an entirely new heat pipe solution that is nothing like the
Oh
heat
boy.
pipe on the regular phone. Dissipates a lot more heat because the 5G, when it's really turned on, it gets toasty warm. And so that's definitely something to consider. And the
Basically, the
S10
whole
5G,
rem of it is the heat pipe because
yeah, basically. Like I was looking at the heat pipe and I'm like, is it more like a heat tapeworm or like it's big. It was really big on that
uh,
phone. So for the S10 5G, that makes sense. And the other thing, obviously, the big cloud over this is, well, there's an S10 5G, but where's the Fold 5G that
Mm,
everyone was initially promised would be coming out this summer? I do wonder what's going to happen with that.
yeah. Well, at least we have the Mate X. Am I correct? Oh, wait. It's not looking good.
Jules, I think you'll find that the Mate X is very proud, socialist, true countryman phone in
Mm,
China for sure, 100%.
indeed,
Best
Comrade David.
best phone, best phone 100 5G.
But
They should just rename it to that. Best phone 100 5G.
but hey, you can also, if you're loaded with money that you just need to throw away, you could put down a pre-order on the Game of Thrones edition Galaxy Fold that will also never
Oh
ever
yeah, that
happen.
story was fun. Is that one of those like Saudi Arabia things
I
where
didn't see who was making it, but they said they were making 7 of them.
wow.
Yeah, a whole whopping 7.
I don't want it. I do want to hold it in my hand and throw it hard against the ground. Just see what happens.
I can't wait for the
just want to
caviar
witness
take.
it.
Yeah, it sounds pretty bad.
Can't wait for the one with Putin on it, like the freaking caviar
Only if he's
ones.
riding a bear.
Only if
That's
he's
the only
riding a bear.
Putin phone I want.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Specifically a bear, huh? I like it.
Well, yeah, of course. Like, like a horse, so played out. Your oligarch's got to be riding something more dangerous.
Wasn't there wasn't yeah. Wasn't there one where Putin was riding a dolphin or surfing on a dolphin?
I've seen that one. I've also seen the bear one. I've seen the horse, and all shirtless, of course,
Yeah, yeah.
because
Yes.
how else do you, do a Putin photo op? But
Yeah,
Oh,
Putin
no,
on the
my bad.
Ritz. Oh,
It was a Oh wait. No, that is definitely a shark, even if the title says dolphin. So no, he was riding a shark.
so another fake Samsung news. Samsung is going to actually this is relatively concerning to people, I think. And the story didn't do as many clicks as I thought it would because honestly, it's fairly concerning. Samsung Cloud is going to drop their 15 gigabyte free tier and just convert to 5 gigabytes, which
that's sad.
that's annoying. Samsung definitely was like, oh yeah, we're going to eat market share from Dropbox and Google Drive and all these other services by offering a bunch of free data. And then they apparently decided, nope. So if
Well,
you
I
have
mean, it's just as much that I was surprised that my freaking Google Drive 20 gigabytes, $5 year deprecation story
who said
got
the
like
magic word?
uh see no get
You can just say stop now. You can say stop and it will just stop, which is the best feature to
but
come.
that was my phone. I just said Google Drive. I didn't say hi. I didn't say hey. I didn't even greet it. It and it still
Well, let me
disrespected
just
me.
try to say it in a weird way. Oh, drive okay. That didn't do anything. Um,
I'm
but
gonna take that and remix it, and it'll be on my mixtape coming soon.
gee, thank you. Check out Jules SoundCloud, which is mostly just people talking on
I'm
podcasts.
very sorry.
In
I'm
terms
very
of
sorry for this podcast.
yeah. I think that about rounds it out for this week, though. I think we'll have it's been a very newsy week, and obviously we could discuss more, but I honestly am waiting for more fallout from the Huawei situation, and I think we're going to see that develop in the next couple of weeks, and we will have more people on the show to discuss their thoughts on that.
We're going to need a digestive in order to keep talking like this. Man, yeah.
Well, thank you for listening to the Android Police podcast, everyone. And check us out on twitch.tv/Android Police and subscribe. If you're an Amazon Prime member, you can subscribe to our podcast for free on Twitch and help support the show. So even if you get nothing of value out of subscribing personally, we get something of value. out of you subscribing, namely money. We want the money. Just give us the money. So go subscribe on Twitch if you're an Amazon Prime member. It doesn't cost you anything. And we greatly appreciate it. It helps support the show and keeps us going. So thank you for listening, everybody, and we will catch you next time.
Cheers.
Good night, everybody.